The Half-Life 2 20th anniversary documentary has given us an inside look at Half-Life 2. There was tons of iconic moments which we got to hear from Valve themselves. The only thing is, it is 2 hours long, so here are a few of the interesting things that you might want to know about. First off, Valve went over their first storyline for Half-Life 2.
So in Half-Life 1, you open this portal, some strange rift to another dimension, and we thought, well, what if that broadcasts this signal to the universe that's like, oh, there's this planet there, it's free air and water. And so then we sort of came up with this idea of, well, there's this mega organization that's resource starved, and they're just gonna come and take it if they can.
How many years passed between? 6?
Yeah.
So I would say the first 2 years, we tried a lot of things. And a lot of those stories, arcs that we had initially didn't have really any carryover from Black Mesa or any of that.
There was originally going to be three different alien races, like the bugs or religious ones, and the antlions actually came out of that bug race that was supposed to be a much bigger part of the game.
It had 3 alien races, the warrior aliens, the insect aliens, and the spy aliens. And it had like a Prague-like city, which ended up being the closest thing to City 17.
In a lot of ways, it reminds me of writing music. You know, everyone was sort of riffing ideas on, well, what if we did this or tried that? I remember we were really ambitious at the beginning. I remember we designed, 4 cities? At one point, Prague, Jerusalem, Chicago, Los Angeles, I believe. We had an Arctic base, an underwater base, an icebreaker ship, an airplane sequence that crashed into a high-rise, which we cut right after 9/11. We had several Combine bases in the wasteland. We had the air exchange, which is where they were taking, the atmosphere from Earth. We had a train depot and so on. So we really obviously had to scale back what we were trying to do, but that's okay to go a little bit nuts at the beginning.
Another cool thing is how Valve made the HEV suit black before Gabe told them to change it back to orange.
Zabi Ing was an influential early contributor. I think, he and I were doing character designs for Gordon and for Alex and for some of the antagonist Combine characters.
At the time, I was looking at a lot of, really the helmets, which I think are kind of one of their defining features, was based off some gas masks from Europe that I had seen in some reference. I remember doing early concepts of the new HEV suit, like what's Gordon gonna be now? And I had kind of just started, and so I was like, I'm gonna make this my own. It looked, I guess, kind of like the still suits in Dune, but black and a lot more belt buckles and latex. And Gabe was just kind of like, what's this? Like, it's Gordon. I was like really proud and excited. It's like, why is it not orange? It's like, or something to that effect of essentially like, why are you giving up this iconic part of the character?
People love it.
Yeah, people love that. So what are you doing? And it's like, I was like, yeah, I guess he's right. So we kind of went back to the drawing board and ended up with what shipped.
Valve also went into and showed some concepts for cut creatures.
And we had so many creatures that we tried and abandoned, not because they were bad, because we had better things to pursue, like there were the sack ticks, the cremator, the crab synth, the stalkers
like
as
the stalkers
an enemy.
We had a little bit in the game,
Yeah,
right?
we shipped the stalkers, but not as an adversary that you fought.
Yeah, there was definitely an evolution of how biological versus how synthetic a lot of the creatures in Half-Life 2 were. And I was always hoping to get to a space where it was ambiguous, where you couldn't quite tell if this was created or if it had grown or if it was natural or synthetic.
There was some synths I did that never shipped. Actually, we did ship them. They were at the end of the game when you're going through the Citadel. I had designed these synths that no animator could figure out how to actually move because they weren't built to move.
And much like some of the environments that we've seen, released in the leak that were very dark, some of the early Half-Life stuff was also very dark. But at the time, video games were very dark.
Valve even went into the dark and gritty feel for Half-Life 2. and the reason it was cut.
The other thing that was really memorable is I remember we started making the world really dystopian, really dark at the beginning, and some of the concept art shows that. We didn't think players would enjoy spending 20 to 40 hours in such a dark and a kind of oppressive setting, so the game lightened up considerably over time, but still maintained the feeling of a security state.
Valve showed off the early version of the gravity gun, while it was really just more of a development tool.
I guess at first, right, the gravity gun was kind of this, we weren't even sure we were going to ship it in the game. It was like a development tool. And so it was like this beam, you could reach out and grab things and pull them toward you or reposition them, drop them, grab them from another point. But then we talked about simplifying it and just making it to where it was just pushing on things and pulling on things. And where could we go with that?
Many people see Gabe Newell as some rich billionaire, but in this documentary, Gabe explained how he almost went bankrupt while making Half-Life 2.
There came a point where Gabe had pretty much used up his liquid assets. And he was like, should I put the house on the market? And I was like, yeah, I think it's the time where you put the house on the market if we want to keep going.
The company was pretty close to going bankrupt. I was pretty close to going personally bankrupt. We went all in. It's like there was no money left. Like,
how anxious was that for you personally?
I don't know. There's certain things that I'm kind of a weird person in a number of dimensions. Like I don't really think, oh, this is super scary. Like I don't have an emotional response to it. I just say, well, this is what we're doing. This is how, and we'll see how it plays out. So I don't think it was super stressful to me, right? I mean, it didn't really bother me. Like I was diving in South Africa recently and a shark tried to bite me a couple of times. And the people around me were way more freaked out than I was. I was like, oh, a shark's trying to bite me. I should get away from the shark. Whereas other people were having like, oh, a shark, it's trying to bite somebody, and I just think that's how I'm wired. I don't think it's anything that speaks to my character or anything. It's like I just seem to not get particularly agitated around risk, which probably means I take on more risk at times than most sane people would, which can be a positive, or you can wreck a bunch of other people's lives being in the neighborhood of your risk indifference.
We got information and looks on the first Striders.
The first time I saw one of those, I think it was Ted Backman's concept. I just thought, I can't believe that I get to use a creature this cool in level design. Like these guys are really, really, really fun to use. I remember Kelly Bailey had created a short list, things like he wanted flocking flyers and he wanted a moving guard tower, which was the first description of the Strider, was a mobile guard tower. So I saw that and immediately understood that, kind of orchestrating the enemies in that way, trying to get the most variety and the most breadth of shape and movement and experience was the correct way to move forward.
The design for that first Strider map was something I came up with and I was really passionate about. It was all about like running across and just getting like one shot in your tush, right? Just as you made it through.
Even just hearing the sound, the thump, thump, thump of them walking, like, okay, there's like a boss nearby. You just see the legs walking by, but you can't see the body. Like, there are so many things you can do with these guys.
Valve even explained their E3 showcase, but from their perspectives.
Yeah, it seems like at some point there was an E3 demo that we got together that we didn't end up showing, but at least at that point it just felt like, oh wow, we actually have made something here.
We went through and made a bunch of demos for 2002, and everybody looked at them and was like, we're still not confident about this, and we don't think we've hit the bar, so we're not going to go at all. Like, they had totally planned to go. And then when 2003 rolled around, I just remember everyone was still terrified. We were like, okay, how are we going to craft everything we've had into like a number of messages about what this product is? And like, we came up with like the core theme of each one of these movies.
Oh, do be careful.
We didn't really understand at the time, I think, the embarrassment of riches that we had. We looked at it from two angles. One was a set of technical features, a sort of conceptual listing of things that we thought were important, like physics and things like that. And then the other side was content-based. What areas of the game were innovative, what areas of the story we thought were compelling, which characters we thought were worth people paying attention to. And so it was an interesting sort of marriage of which features and which content are the best showcase for all those things. A lot of what was in the demos was rendering technology, but I think the stuff that felt the strongest to most of us at the time was really physics-based.
So if something looks like wood, then it sounds like wood, scrapes like wood, floats like it, and if you shoot it, it'll fragment like wood.
To people at that time, it was pretty mind-blowing just to watch be able to pick things up, knock other things over, use things in a way that felt true to a three-dimensional reality. Maybe it's on those videos, I don't remember, but people were gasping and hitting the people next to them because they couldn't really believe what they were seeing on the screen.
There's no limitation on the complexity of those interactions. So it's this level of believable and consistent interactivity that opens the door to a wide variety of new gameplay mechanics.
This will run on my 486.
That person who was talking about a 486, obviously it's just about, you must have a supercomputer behind, how are you even doing this? What is going on? The lines outside the booth became enormous, and it was the thing that it really distorted the rest of E3 because so many people were anxious to come see our demo.
And I remember seeing this absolutely enormous line with some pretty well-known people in there, right? Miyamoto was in line for this stuff, and
Will Wright, I think.
Yeah, Will Wright. There was a bunch of, and so then after that was all done, people on the team were just okay, we are ready. We can ship this game. We know we've got something good. It was really easy at that point. It felt like we were rolling the ball downhill
Until it leaked.
Until it leaked.
Another part of the documentary was how the Half-Life 2 leak affected all the different Valve employees who were working on the game, as they each went over that whole experience.
When something like this happens, there's not a big sign saying you've been hacked and somebody has access. You start off with something that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and you start pulling on that sweater thread.
Gabe's brother had a company called Tangis, and they made wearable computer stuff. So he was kind of winding it down, and he had 1 or 2 Unix servers that hosted the tangis.com domain name. Unfortunately, they were put inside the firewall and didn't have the latest Linux or whatever security updates on them. And so this kid from Germany was able to sort of exploit his way into that. He sat there for months, I think. He was able to sync the build, all the source code.
I was riffing ideas for, I think in particular, Counter-Strike. That information ended up on one of the internet chat rooms. And only 2 people knew the contents of that email. It was, of course, Gabe and myself. And I went to ITG and said, this could only have come from a leaked email. We got to figure out how that got out there.
But I remember at some point Gabe walking around, one of those moments turn your computer off, something just happened.
That's right.
I remember the video on my desk and he coming turn your computer off, I think we're being hacked. And I was, what? I didn't know what to do. I actually did not know what to do.
I remember coming in that morning and figuring it out, and it just felt like someone had just punched me in the gut.
It's like the bit in movies where after an explosion, they'll have a scene where someone's staggering around the street and everyone's
yeah.
What's this mean? Can we still keep working on the game? Yeah. Is someone just going to release the whole game tomorrow?
And I don't know if the guy who hacked it intended to,
he showed it to friends.
He intended the wide distribution.
He showed it to friends, and then one of his friends posted it somewhere.
Yeah.
Unfortunate.
The things I think that's pretty interesting is how much the leak of the game, the hack of our network and the leak of the game, how much that kind of shattered that confidence.
It was like, having a movie that you're working on be spoiled for the world. That's how it felt. Because we knew it would be hard for people to know that existed and not go look at it all. It looked all broken to us, and it just felt really demoralizing.
Oh man, I was seriously affected by that. I was pretty angry, so I don't know. It kind of affected me for a while. Having it called the beta when it was not even close to being a beta. Work in progress, Wasn't really ready to be seen yet.
Normally the office is pretty vibrant and loud, and people are riding scooters in the hallway and doing all sorts of stuff. Gabe's tubing throat singing, and It got very still and very quiet. I remember that. That was very eerie. That was the game that was going to make or break the company. We didn't know if we were going to have to go find jobs.
Not only did it show everybody that we were not anywhere near where we said we would be, but all the work that we had in progress, all the plans that we were making were just laid out bare. And so a lot of us just thought, oh, we're toast. We've worked so hard. Are we going to go bankrupt? And then all that while Scott Lynch and Gabe were being sued by Sierra, their wives being delivered subpoenas. And so it was this super dark time.
Gabe Newell mentioned how 99% of people doubted him, saying online distribution would never happen.
It was a very weird time. Like, I don't think people understand how many times we would go to people and say, no, you will be able to distribute software over the internet, and have people just say, no, it will never happen. I'm not talking about one or two people. I mean, like 99% of the companies we talked to said it will never happen. Your retail sales force will never let it happen. But also people would say users aren't gonna want this, right? People want physical copy. Like, there were so many bad faith arguments that were being made. Retail sales is not the goal, right? It's actually an impediment that it's somebody who sits between you and the customer.
The decision to not only use Steam to ship Half-Life 2, but actually to require Steam, even in the versions that were purchased at retail in a box, was the most interesting decision of all those, because it turned out to be an incredibly important decision for the future of the company. And a lot of us were nervous, and a lot of the people who had been at Valve for a long time, since the very beginning, were the most nervous about that decision. And so it was one of the rare exceptions to our decision-making process usually, and Gabe had to really step in and say, no, actually, we're doing it this way.
Valve even opened up on the canceled episode 3.
We were gonna do an arc of 3, of course, because that's just how you think of stories in those terms. And then you want the high point to come at the end of the second one. And Gabe at one point saying, who's the important character you're gonna kill? I'm like, Lamar is going down. This is gonna be it. Like, I want episode 2 to end with Lamar floating into space and like everyone cries. And Gabe's like, that's not good enough.
The episodes were, a lot of that was an experiment on like, what's the right amount of episode? Episode 2 was longer than episode 1 and bigger, and people liked that better. But
it also took longer.
It took longer to make, and people didn't like it as much as they liked Half-Life or Half-Life 2 kind of scope, right?
Yeah.
So by saying episode, are we solving a lot of problems here, or are we just making a sideways trade-off? You know, I think that's maybe the way I felt about it.
Even into episode 3, I still don't know what that would have been if we'd built it, because it hadn't been built. That was the feeling of excitement of something I can't even imagine is gonna happen as a team. I was not like imposing like a top-down, this is what we must do to tell our very important tale. You know, it's more like, oh, we have new features? Like, what kind of story can we do with these now?
A piece of cut content we got to see from episode 3 was this cool ice gun and blob, which just never came out, but now we have some footage of it.
Well, I worked on episode 3, and I was working on this gun called the ice gun that basically let you create amorphous shapes out of ice. So you could like raise a little ice wall in front of yourself. It would be attached to the floor, and then the Combine soldiers could shoot holes in it, and it would shatter and break, like kind of like glass, I guess. So that was the primary mode of you could build ledges for yourself to get down, you know, cliff faces. It had another mode that was like a kind of like a Silver Surfer mode, where you would extrude the ice in front of yourself and then run along it and use it to cross gaps, go over chasms and things like that. What else do we have? It was set in the Arctic because it was centered around Borealis.
I remember the little blobby, squishy.
Oh yeah, Brian was working on the blobs. So we had the iso surfaces that we ended up using in Portal for the paint. So we had that as an enemy. It was a blob enemy, and it could change its shape, and you could choreograph its shapes with some content tools. And then it could also split into little hoppy blobs that could, they were almost like little head crabby things, but they were, they were little splats that would hop around. And we were doing all kinds of stuff with that. It could pass through grates.
You could get more gameplay out of something where you had maybe a couple of creatures with simpler behaviors.
Oh yeah.
And then you would spend time like combining them with other game mechanics.
Valve explained how Episode 3 was cut 6 months in development.
Story was never the boss of anything. It was always we worked on a peer-to-peer thing. We were all gonna, what can we do? What do you think would be cool?
It was still a collection of like playable levels in no particular order, and a collection of story beats and story concepts. And we were still like, probably another 6 months we would have had a critical mass of like mechanics, and then start putting them in a timeline. I think probably a year and a half easily, depending on how ambitious we got. Could have been, 2.5 more years. Yeah.
Probably. It's hard to be a lot less than 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we were 6 months in on it when we moved to Left 4 Dead. I don't know, we were moving at a pretty brisk pace too.
I thought that we needed to go much bigger on Episode 3 or do something else, because I don't know if this is the right way to describe it, but element fatigue. I think we had really explored a lot of what made sense in the Half-Life universe and setting.
Arcane was building the Ravenholm game, and even they were having trouble doing cool new stuff with this tool set. And like, if those guys can't figure out a bunch of cool stuff to do with this, I think we're running out of fuel.
Episode 3 is coming along. It's like, well, what's the new big thing here? It's got to be bigger than all the stuff we just did. Even Episode 2, and it's like, oh my god,
Gabe Newell even gave his thoughts and the reason the project failed.
We could have definitely gone back and spent 2 years to make Episode 3.
And you can't get lazy and say, oh, we're moving the story forward. That's copping out of your obligation to gamers, right? Yes, of course they love the story. They love many, many aspects of it. But sort of saying that your reason to do it is because people want to know what happens next. We could have shipped it. Like, it wouldn't have been that hard. The failure was, my personal failure was being stumped. Like, I couldn't figure out why doing Episode 3 was pushing anything forward.
This wasn't it though, as Valve explained how new Half-Life games are about innovation.
If it weren't for the episodes, there'd be no such thing as Dota. And I know that sounds really weird, but it was the things that we learned in developing the episodes that led to, Team Fortress, to more rapid updates.
I think everybody that worked on Half-Life misses the working on that thing, but it's also hard not to be like, man, I've seen every way that you can fight an antlion or, whatever. And so you want to get some space away from it until you can come back to it with fresh eyes.
It was easy to think about VR being a vehicle for Half-Life because that was a big technological innovation and kind of a core reason for that product's existence. And I think one of the things we have internally tended to attach to the Half-Life IP is innovation. Gameplay innovation is oftentimes enabled by a technological innovation. Clearly there was a ton in Half-Life 1 and 2. And so yeah, it's an interesting challenge moving forward to think about what that means for future Half-Life stuff for sure.
The ending of Half-Life Alyx is somewhat a self-critical realization. So that was super satisfying, and all credit to the people who are specifically involved in that decision and those sets of designs. I think that Half-Life represents a tool we have and promises made to customers to capitalize on innovation and opportunities to build game experiences that haven't been involved previously. And I think that there are no shortage of those opportunities facing us as an industry right now.
Is Gabe saying Valve is now ready to expand the Half-Life series and come out with Half-Life 3?